Hello everyone, this is Stephanie at Hightower Stitching with today's video, and it is especially for people who are beginning to wanting to quilt. And the name of this video is Beginning Quilter Hand Stitched 2-patch 3-color dramatic geometric 12-inch block. That's a lot, but if you're just starting to quilt, we're going to talk about a lot of those things. And so here is a sample of the block that we want to work on today. And you might look at that as a beginner and say, oh my gosh, I think she's getting me into more than I can do. Let me tell you, you will learn one really nice technique. Well, you'll learn a lot of techniques, but you will find out that this block is very manageable for a beginner. And once you can make 12-inch block, you can put those 12-inch blocks together to make a runner, to make a pillow front, to make a lap quilt, which is a small quilt, or to even go towards a quilt. You never can tell, because till you start, you can't tell how far you're going to get. And the source of this is Quilt Maker 2021, May through June, and it's page 19. So let's just start with your fabric. Most quilters like to use 100% cotton. It has such a nice soft feel, and it's so easy to sew through. So check on that when you get ready to start, because you can, or have somebody look at some of your material and say, this is cotton, this isn't. Or go buy some cotton fabric, and you're not going to need much for this if you're just going to do a sample. Once you get it home, take and run it through a light rinse with maybe a little bit of soap in the washing machine. You want to take out the sizing that's put on the fabric. And at first you're going to say, oh, this is so shiny and pretty. Why do I want to do that? Well, you'll notice a difference when you take it out and dry it, because it will now have a real cottony feel to it. And the slick will be gone, but that's good. You want that. Now this quilt, it's only got 2 different size patches, and patches are the pieces that you put together. If you look at the first square at the top, the large one, that's a 6.5-inch square, and that was the center one that was gray in my sample. And you're only going to need one of those, so you might actually get some fabric from somebody and have plenty to do it. And then the other patches are 3.5-inch squares, and we're going to have 8 white ones, and we're going to have 8 green, and that's the color that makes that sort of roadside intersection look to your quilt. Before we start hand stitching, I wanted to go back and look at the sample block that I did, because it's going to be a little different. We're going to have 3 rows, and you say, but I see 4 rows. Well, we're going to work this as 3 rows, because the first row straight across is only those blocks, those 3.5-inch blocks. And then if you look at the second row, it's made up of 2 rows really, but you have that nice gray square in the middle. We're going to do that first for that row, and then we're going to add on the black and the white boxes. And then look at the last row. You're going to see that's going to repeat the first row, except the 2, the black and the white in the center, are reversed. That's where we're going to go on that. But every row is just straight stitching, so we're going to work on mastering stitching for this project. All right, now we're getting down to business. You get all the fun of picking your colors and cutting your squares, and then you get to cut them. Well, we cut them out, and then you're going to be ready to sew them. So we get all of our pieces ready, and I have my stack sitting here of the greens and the whites and the greens, and then I have my 6.5-inch square. Now, Well, only there's one. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to take 4 of your your solid that you're going to use. You want to draw a line that goes from one corner to the next. And make sure it's nice and straight and it's right corner to corner. And you want to do that with all 4 of your pieces. This is going to make it really nice when you get ready to stitch, because we're going to start with the middle block and we're going to put these little blocks on the corners. We're going to do a stitch and flip, stitch, cut and flip. So I have my square. I'm going to set my piece in there very neatly, and that's what you're going to find out about quilting. If you get into a big hurry or you get into slipshod, and if you've ever heard that word, that might be way back from my past, but it's going to catch up with you, especially if you're doing a whole bunch of blocks. Okay, so now my tool is just going to be a nice, sharp, slender needle, and it can be as long as or as short as you want it to do. And a lot of it's got to do with your hands. If you can handle a long needle that's kind of thin. But what we're going to do is I've already put a knot, and I'm going to use a double thread, because sometimes if the thread's really heavy, and you don't really want to use a heavy on here, but this I also want you to be able to see. But if your thread is strong, you could just use a single, but you put a knot in the end of it, and then you come over to get ready to start. And you're going to get so tired of hearing me say this, but this is what you would hear on any beginning video that I do, because this is the beginning, and it makes you have the workmanship of a quilter. So I'm going to go in from the top and go down, and I went up, and you will get where you can do this, and you actually sort of pick your finger in the back to know that the needles come on down. Now I'm doing this like 3 at a time. When you start, you might just do 2 stitches, and you pull your thread. Okay, now look at that bump. Well, you don't want to leave those, so let's straighten that out. You can straighten it out at the end, but it's easier just to do it as you go. All right, then I'm going to take my needle. I'm looking through the camera. This is funny. And I'm going to do it again. In a minute, we're going to look at the back and see if, even looking through the camera, I can do a halfway decent job. And there I could get 3 on there again, and I'm going to pull it. Now, did you notice this is a bigger block that I'm adding on this 3.5 inch? So I actually pinned it in place, and I tried to put it where my needles wouldn't bother me. Now my pins wouldn't bother. I'm going to turn over. And I can see that I have a line of stitching going across there. And you want to try and make them even if you can. But the main thing is just holding those 2 pieces of fabric together. So don't take great big stitches. We're going to go across, up and down, straighten it out. And if you get to about the middle and that pin is starting to bother you or poke you, you just take it out, or take it out and move it down closer to the corner of your green block. And this may seem like it's taken a long time, but let me tell you, if you're watching TV or listening to music, it looks like I might have a little glitch right there. Sometimes you'll get a little knot, and you just sort of play with it and then pull it, and there, that one's straightened out. Sometimes they don't. And if it's not a big mess that's going to make a bump in your quilt, you can actually just keep going. And I'm going to get 2 stitches that time. If you've ever talked to any quilters, they love that when you hand stitch, it is just so restful. And that's hard to believe. You say, well, you sure do have to just be patient. And you get to the other end, and I'm going to get there now. That one was off. like I said, I'm going through the camera. Okay. And then now I'm going to go back and knot off. I'm not going to put a knot. I'm just going to take and run my thread back through the last stitch that I made, or close to it, a couple of times, so that it'll be secure and won't come undone. Because if you just cut it without going back and forth or tying a little bit of knot, everybody figures out what they want to do. And that's probably one of the most important things I can tell you, is that quilters have been doing this for a long time, and quilters have trained quilters in the way that they did. And sometimes you'll read something and somebody will say, this is the way you do it. Well, take it with a grain of salt. And because you will find that there are a lot of ways to do things when you quilt, and that makes it fun too. So now I'm pretty pleased with that. I'm going to turn it over. Okay, that looks pretty good. Because some people will tell you to do a back stitch. Well, you don't have to do a back stitch, and that really takes a long time. Now, I want this to be about 1/4 of an inch from my stitching line, and I'm going to cut it. These little scissors. Don't have to be little scissors, just something that you can control when you cut it. Now you can see we stitched, we cut, and now we're going to flip. And I'm one of those quilters that likes to open their seams because of the bulk, because I used to finish all of my quilts were hand quilted even to the end, and now I've fallen in love with my sewing machine and I have so much fun. But this is a finger press, and you just take and open the seam and mash it between your fingers, and you go all the way to the end. And sometimes there are some blocks, this is really funny, but the best way to do them is to finger press, and don't do any pressing till you get done. You notice I didn't say iron. Don't press till you get done. So that would be my first corner, and then I would take my second corner, and usually it's nice to do opposite corners. So if I did this one, I'd like to turn it over and do this one instead of going around, which seems so logical, but there's just something a little bit different about that. And you set it up there, and now see, you line up your edges, and you got the top one lined up. And it really, even for me, it was a lot nicer to put a pin or two in there. I think 2 pins, one at the top and one at the bottom, and do that right there. Okay, so now there were 4 of those, and you would take and do the same thing and then stitch across there. And I'm starting to put timestamps on the video, so like on this one, you can go back to the part where it starts talking about stitching across, because I'd be repeating myself, and you can do that as many times as you want to by looking at the timestamps. And when I stopped, I thought, okay, I'm a beginner, and I saw the block, I saw the pieces, but I need to think about where I want to go. So if you had time, if it was me, as who I am, then I would go ahead and quickly go back and do my pattern with the 4 blocks at the top, and this one was the colored one. That's the one thing about doing this. I can't send you a pattern or anything, because that's not the way this system works. And this are the black ones. But then this one is going to have your nice square in the middle that we did, the squared off corners. All right, and so is this. And then you come down and you have another colored one, a white one. And then if you remember, the only difference between the first and the fourth row was to come and just change those positions. And I call this my cheat sheet. When I work on my sewing machine and I'm going to repeat a pattern and I want to get the muscle memory going, I'll talk to myself as I look at that and work on the pattern that I'm working on. So then you'd have this, and then you could have it forever, and you know that you only have a 6.5 in the middle, and all of these are 3.5 inch squares. All right. So there we did a piece that you had to go from corner to corner. And I'm going to tell you, now that I'm thinking about it, that's really a good one for you to start with, because the next one's going to be sewing them together, but we're going to sew them along the edge. Okay, now this is going to be a little different. We're going to draw a line when you first start, because all quilts go with the idea of being a 1/4 of an inch wide seam when you get ready to start. And the easiest way to do that is just to take a ruler and to mark the edge of the light piece that you want to put together. And you say, well, what do you use? Well, I just use a regular mechanical pencil. It makes the finest line, and you want to stay on the line when you use that. When you start using something that's got a wider the end on it and makes a wider line, you have to play with where the 1/4 of an inch is. Is it right on the line, or is it to the right of the line or the left? But that comes later. All right. So now I've got my two pieces, and I think you can see it a little bit. And the nice thing about it is that you can go over it a couple times and then you can see the line. All right. So we're going to lay these face to face, the dark one on the bottom and the light one on the top. And it doesn't matter, because this one had a light back, and I could have used my mechanical pencil and marked all of that. It's just to do the one that you can mark, that you can see it. All right. Now, you've got to get a grip. I'm going to pin it, because I think I could keep going, but I don't want you to think that you have to do that you can start. And you're going to start over here at the right-hand side, and we're going to start and go down, and it doesn't matter those intersect in this pattern. You come up past the intersection to your right, and you get ready to start. So I've got my thread and my needle, and I've traded into a bigger needle, so don't think you're blind or something's happened. It's, well, not blind, you can see it. And I'm just going to start, and I'm going to go up and down. Now this needle's bigger. I'm having a little more challenge, but you can see when I started to do that piece that went across the big squares, the big square, man, I just grabbed everything and it was ready to go. But when you first start with this, and then as soon as you get those first couple of stitches, you can start and you can make your stitch nice, and you poke your finger in the back a little bit so you know. And I used to have some tough ends of my fingers when I first started. But then I also learned for one of my fingers to save it was to put a thimble on it. And everybody finds the thimble that they love. And I tell you, and it fits just right. And I actually had sewn so much with one of them that the needle went through the metal. Finally, it just got so fatigued. I guess it's fatigue. And you can see this one's going faster than the other one. And it's just going straight across. And it's different than going that diagonal. Pull that pin out now. I'm so far I don't need him. Straighten my threads out so they don't get stuck on anything. Smooth it, because that's going to make it a nice press line when you get ready to press. And I'm all the way to the end. And I'm going to double back. Now, I could feel it. Oh, yes. See, when I look at the back, I've got a nice row there that's going to hold that in place. And I would have used a cream thread probably, but when you open it up, and even though I'm using black, you can't see it. So sometimes I use my leftover thread, different colors, and then here again on this pattern, I'd come back over here and I'd finger press it. And I would have begun the first row at the top. Look how nice that is. You will love it. You will love it. Then what I want to do is I'm going to mark my next white. I would have marked these ahead probably. And I'm going to lay it down there and go. Now, if you go and you draw the box all the way around, then every time two pieces come together, you're going to be able to stitch those. So once you stitch these, and for example, if I was going to do the next row and add it on, when I added this row on here, I'd have the side back here, and it would have the box, the line, and the next one would have the line, and you'd be set to do the run all the way across there. I think I'm going to stop on this lesson. You can do this whole block now with what I've shown you to do. I'm going to think about this a little bit longer and see if it's worth doing a short part 2, putting the rows together. This is Stephanie at Hightower Stitching. If you enjoyed this, please hit subscribe and like, and then leave comments or questions if you have questions, especially if you're a beginner, because that's who this was for. Thank you.